I want to hear cannons. Downfield, pull up, ball to the 5, touchdown Tampa Bay. Mike Evans does it again. Fire the cannons, Bucs.
It's first and goal. That's picked off. That's picked off. And who else? Rondé Barber. And the Tampa Bay Buccaneers may ride to the Super Bowl with that one.
Third down, 18. Dropping Gannon, looking Gannon. Throws up with a head. Intercepted. At the 40. Derek Brooks 30. Brooks to the 25. 20. Derek Brooks all the way. There it is. The dagger's in. We're going to win the Super Bowl. And then the cannons come. Fire them. Keep on firing them. Keep on firing them.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to a brand new edition of the Cannon Fire Podcast. I am your host, Rhett Matthew, joined alongside me, my good buddy and co-host from BucsNation.com, Evan Wanish. Today we are going to wrap up Week 6 game between the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the New Orleans Saints. And listen, I'm very excited. I know I don't sound that excited, but I'm going to be honest with you, Evan, that's the kind of game that takes years off of your life. And it certainly shaved a couple of years off of mine. 51-27, your final score, as the Tampa Bay Buccaneers take control in the second half. And they fight their way back into a game that, Evan, at one point looked like it was going to snowball into something much worse than it ended up being. But this is a big-time win, a big-time division win for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, looking to avoid dropping another division game here in the NFC South. And I mean, there are just records all over the place in this one for offensive production. Turnovers as well played a factor into it. Multiple turnovers for both of these teams. I mean, this was a game that quite literally had everything. Like, there's been a couple of games this year, even last year, where you can say, oh, it was a tale of two halves for the Bucs. No, it was a tale of four quarters today. It felt like there were two games worth of action in this one afternoon.
Yeah, I think the Bucs alone had over 500 yards offensively. 5 total turnovers, I Bleav, by both sides. The Saints score 27 in one quarter, the Bucs score 17 in another. Bucs come back and really control the game mostly in the fourth quarter, right? I think it took them a little bit to settle down, but you're right. We'll talk about it. Obviously, we have the entire show to get into the details, but this was a game that could have very easily gotten away, right? Have gotten out of hand. It was getting out of hand, quite frankly. Like it was. It was spiraling that way. As we have a $2 super chat from Fabian Tabaris. Winning big against the Aints always feels good. Yeah, I mean, it feels good to win in a division game anyway, right? Especially with thank you for the super chat again, Fabian. Especially after, the crushing loss last week, they simply couldn't afford 2 straight divisional losses, right? And this is a big one. And again, this was something where they needed to regroup, right? Come back. Things were not going well in that second quarter. And they were able to settle themselves down and play their brand of football. I know a lot of people are going to, talk about the defense. I think the defense deserves a little bit of praise as well. They did pitch a shutout in the second half. So yes, their second quarter wasn't great. There was a special team touchdown in there, 2 interceptions that put the defense in tough positions. So not always the greatest spots they were being put in, but altogether, like you said, there was about 2 or maybe 3 games worth of action packed into one today. So there's a lot to digest here.
With 597 yards of offense, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers set a new franchise record for net yards of offense in a single game. The 51 points scored today marks Tampa Bay's second most points scored in a single game in franchise history, trailing only Week 4 of the 2019 season against the LA Rams. They scored 55 in a game that we covered on this show as well. So, I mean, really, where do you want to start with this one? We are going to be all over the field. There's a lot of guys who stepped up and played incredibly well in this game. I think where we should really focus and start to unpack this game is the process of this first half. It is a textbook start for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Yeah. They march down the field. Baker Mayfield, 6 for 6, all the way down the field, finds Chris Godwin for a 4-yard touchdown pass, and the Buccaneers notch their third straight opening drive touchdown, something that they have not done in quite some time. I remember for the longest time, we were begging for a hot start, an opening drive touchdown. They have now done it 3 weeks in a row. And then things just continue to go well, right? About as good of a start as you could have wanted for both sides of the football here for Tampa Bay. Your offense, your quarterback plays well, 6 for 6, you get a touchdown. You get a big-time forced fumble from Tyke Smith. Antoine Winfield Jr., who is back in the lineup this week, scoops up the fumble, takes it, I believe, 58 yards for the Tampa Bay touchdown, makes it a 14-0 ball game. Another defensive stop. Your offense gets the ball. They march down the field. And although they couldn't get into the touchdown, they are able to look to Money Mac. He makes it 17-0. So at this point, it's, kind of business as usual for the Buccaneers offense. Clearly, they showed up ready to play. They were moving the ball effectively. Even when the game got out of hand, and we'll talk about that in a bit, they still did a really good job of moving the football on New Orleans today. But once that second quarter started, that 17-0 lead disappeared pretty quickly. And man, just walk us through what happened here, Evan, because it was one bad thing turned into 50. It felt like it didn't stop for a while.
Yeah. So, we talked about, the Bucs needing to settle themselves down. The Saints need to settle themselves down, right? They're down 14-0 like that. And yeah, it's good to see the Bucs get off to a hot start, especially defensively. I think they said during the broadcast, it was like 70-something straight games that they had gone without a fumble return for a touchdown. So I know it's not very common, but still, that's a lot of football games. So it was nice to see the defense get off to a hot start. Where the Saints were able to calm themselves down, I think, was they had a drive right after the Bucs had made it 17-0. One, the Bucs went down inside the red zone and they had to kick a field goal. That's a win for New Orleans, right? That is some positive thing that they can take away from this game. But after that, the Saints then got the ball trailing 17-0. And they were able to get a drive. It didn't result in a touchdown, but it took off some clock, right? They were able to sort of relax themselves. And then eventually, they the Bucs kind of beat themselves. I'm not going to, sit here and lie. The Bucs did kind of beat themselves, but so they kick the field goal. Then the Bucs come back, right? And how do you come back from that? Okay. You start first play, penalty. Second play so it's 1st and 15, penalty. 1st and 20. Before you even snap the football. Both were pre-snap penalties. That can't happen, right? That's something that I think the coaching staff, if you could take away one negative from this game, it's that, right? The penalties are something that is going to have to be cleaned up. It's that simple. The penalties are something that the coaches are not going to be happy with.
We can also maybe sidebar and talk about the officiating crew at some point as well, because there were some inconsistencies there. I think some conversations to be had, but between both teams, it was awful today. For Tampa Bay, 12 penalties, 83 yards. For New Orleans, 7 penalties for 70 yards. That is just a ridiculous amount of yards. 153 penalty yards in this game. And again, at times where the Bucs, were seemingly clawing their way back into this game, playing from behind. There were so many points where it was one step forward, 2 steps back because of another penalty. These guys were throwing laundry all over the place today. They sucked. And this officiating crew was garbage.
Yeah. Look, with Bucs Saints, you're expecting a lot of extracurricular activity, right? You're expecting a lot of that. At one point, I was like, man, this is almost like a hockey game. It's like after every in a hockey game, after every whistle, there's a little skirmish maybe around the goalie or something. That's how this was turning out. It seemed like after every snap, there was something going on with somebody. And then the Buccaneers have to punt, right? But they have to punt after a unnecessary roughness penalty by Sterling Shepard. And then Jake Camarda punts it, and Rashid Shaheed very easily. I don't know what type of punt coverage they're playing, but that might have been one of the easiest returns, like punt returns I've ever seen. He was barely touched. Then all of a sudden, 17-10, but the Bucs hit the ball right back. What do? They have 2 plays because they start with an unsportsmanlike conduct penalty after a run, puts them back. Then the pick happens. And that one, Mayfield obviously threw 3 interceptions today. I'd put 1 on him, and it's this one. It's the first one here to Paulson Adebo. Thought he had Mike Evans open, got fooled, wasn't open, and Adebo made a nice play on it. So that's something I think Baker would like to have back. The other 2 were kind of more so fluky. The second one, McMillan sort of has to have, and the third one was really fluky. It hits Brzee bats the ball down, it hits off his helmet, and then into the arms of Cam Jordan. I don't really know what you can do about that.
I feel like we've said it time and time and time again over the years, but these feel like the type of plays that only happen against New Orleans. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's the gold and then their uniforms, but it just some kind of bad mojo always seems to swirl around the Bucs. And there's been so many times where plays like that start to pile up, and then eventually the game just gets out of hand. You know, you see a little bit of a late effort, you know, a last gasp of air to try and get themselves back into the game, and normally it's not enough. But again, with the wide range of emotions this game carried me through, it was definitely reassuring to see the Buccaneers collect themselves and ultimately finish this game and finish it in a very, very strong way, the way that they did. Like, they didn't just barely win the game. They completely buried New Orleans in that second half.
Yeah, to just put a cap on the second quarter, though, obviously, like I said, after that punt return for a touchdown, where the Saints made it 17-10, it went interception, 2 plays for -7 yards, 40 seconds off the clock. Saints kicked a field goal. The Bucs defense held them there, which I think the Bucs defense had a better day than I think it's going to show on the scoreboard. You know, you'll see 27 points. It's all in one quarter, and like I said, one of them was a punt return. They were put in some bad positions, but interception, field goal. 2 plays later, after the Bucs get the ball back, another interception. Touchdown for the Saints. Then a touchdown for the Bucs. The Bucs respond. I Bleav that was the Sean Tucker. Yeah, Sean Tucker for 36 yards. We'll talk about him a little bit later. He had a really big day. And then, but again, you know, then the Saints score a touchdown. Then another interception. And at this point, you know, the Bucs are kind of reeling, right? So, and the Saints, remember, the Saints get the ball to start the second half. Yeah. So the Saints had an opportunity to get it to a 2-score game. The Saints are up 3. They get the ball started the second half. The Bucs force a punt. Then the Bucs punt, then the Saints punt, and then the Bucs score a touchdown. That was the Chris Godwin one to take the lead. And after that, it seemed like that was when they had really settled down, right? You get the interception from McCollum later on. Great grab by Zon McCollum. He was beat on the play. The ball was a little bit underthrown, but he made a great catch on it. And then, like I said, it seemed like after that interception, they really settled down and found their footing, and then never really looked back.
We got a couple of super chats to catch up on here after the Buccaneers win. Some good vibes here among the Cannon Fire crew. Zach Jarvis with $9.99 says Buck and Tuck needs to be running back 1 and 2.
That's an elite nickname. I'll give you that.
Yeah, Sean Tucker and Bucky Irving definitely did their thing today. We'll dive into their big performance here in a little bit. Amazement 717 with $9.99. Thank you, my friend. Said, them young Bucs draft picks showed out today. Shout out to Sean Tucker for his first career touchdown. Couple of big-time touchdowns for Sean Tucker today. Had his first receiving touchdown and then closed things out with his first rushing touchdown there in the second
That's
half.
like one of them things like the fantasy performances that help no one.
Yeah.
Like it's
Yeah.
that Sean Tucker's day is the one that helps no one.
Exactly. It'll be interesting to see. You know, Sean Tucker could be very hot on the waiver wire this week among fantasy football owners, but Rachaad White getting back into the lineup, we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. But for now, let's wrap it up here with Amazement. Said Zion, a huge pick. Only negative was a few penalties and a few turnovers, which were a little bit fluky. But a 50-piece on the Saints is always worth celebrating over. And Tyke Smith also balled out. Yeah, a couple of big-time players today and some recent Buccaneers draft picks as well. And on top of that, a $2 super chat from Fabian Tavares says, winning big against the Saints always feels good. Against the Aints, excuse me. Let me make sure I make that important distinction. So, all right, it was a historic day for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers offense, and I want to talk about the quarterback before we talk about some of the other playmakers. It was an up-and-down day for Baker Mayfield, but I think it was a character day for Baker Mayfield. Maybe that sounds cliche. Maybe it sounds a little corny, but the box score looks like this. 24 for 36, 328, 4 touchdowns, 3 interceptions for Baker Mayfield. He also ran the ball 3 times for 29 yards, averaging 9.7 yards a tote. It was an up-and-down day for Baker Mayfield. Started the way he has a lot of games this season where he looked great. Looks comfortable in the pocket, was getting rid of the ball quickly. The game plan was benefiting him and the offense. They were moving the ball effectively. And then that first interception happens. And then the Buccaneers make an effort to continue throwing the football because, let's be honest, we said it last week on the podcast, this is a throwing offense. I think Liam Cohen definitely knows that. So you go back to your quarterback, the guy who has been playing really well, right? You would argue they lost that game against Atlanta because they stopped putting the ball in Baker's hands. So they go back to the quarterback. And then another interception happens. And, again, one of those tacky interceptions right off of the hand of Jalen McMillan, hit him right in the breadbasket, and, just pops up in the air. Saints able to take advantage. And after that, there was a period in the second quarter where Baker was getting restless in the pocket. Couldn't really see receivers downfield. Seemed like he was having a hard time finding the open man, hanging onto the ball a little bit too long. Some of the things that we have criticized him for in the past. And it was at that moment after that second interception, I did not get a great feeling in the pit of my stomach. The Bucs were still putting themselves in this game. They were competing. The offense was still moving the football. But the way things were happening, and again, that snowball effect of mistakes in the second quarter, it didn't feel great. But honestly, man, I know he didn't throw the ball very much here in the second half. Bucky Irving and Sean Tucker were kind of the main event here on the offensive side of the ball. But I still think it was a good day for Baker to hang in there and see this thing through. He played well down the stretch, I think. He made the most of the passes that he did get in the second half because, again, he wasn't throwing a lot in the second half there.
Yeah, and he got a little bit banged up, obviously. Had to not gonna really come out of the game, but you do wonder if it was a 4th and 1, like 4th and inches almost. You do wonder if he's not hurt, do they go for that spot? I would have hoped they would if he wasn't, hurt, because that was something where, you go for that in that spot, but ended up not really hurting the Bucs there. And, luckily he was able to come back in the game. I thought he played pretty well for the most part. Again, I'm not going to put all 3 interceptions on him. The first one got to make just a better read there, a better decision. A couple times he could have been a little more accurate with the football. A couple times I think he held the ball a little bit too long, but again, that's sort of nitpicking. I thought he played well. I thought he did the right things, and especially, like you said, in that second half, didn't have to do too much with the Buccaneers being able to run the football as good as they had. But I will say that this second half offense, in general. Greg Olson had noted it on the broadcast, but I'm going to actually go back even further here, where last week, right? Why did the Buccaneers lose the game? We said the offense disappeared in the second half. Buccaneers scored 6 points in the second half last week. The week before that against the Eagles, they scored 9. Now, I know they were up big in that game, but you still just scored 9. The Bucs scored 0 in second half points in the game against the Denver Broncos. So that's 15 second half points in the last 3 games for the Buccaneers. They were up to 27 today. So 27 second half points today for the Buccaneers, including 20 in the fourth quarter alone. And Mayfield has a big part in that, converting some third downs, using his legs to his advantage still. And I thought he played well, and against a defense that has given the Bucs some troubles in the past, right? And I thought Liam Cohen did a pretty good job. I think it was in the it was first quarter. It was first quarter. The triple flea flicker, kinda. Like that was awesome. Yeah. that was. If anybody gets a clip of that, please send it my way. I've been looking this. I know it was only like an 11-yard gain. So I don't know how much it'll be clipped, but I need to see that again. I like the creativity out of Liam Cohen, and I thought Baker had a decent day.
Yeah, and I thought on that play in particular, smart football by Baker Mayfield to kind of realize that the offense was in a position where if you're calling a triple reverse flea flicker or whatever the hell it was, they were obviously in control of where they were. They were kind of in a position to have a little bit of fun. And I think when you have an offensive coordinator dangle the carrot in front of you like that and you're a quarterback like Baker Mayfield, they were looking for the big shot there. It wasn't there. He took the check down. They still pick up positive yardage. I thought that was a good job by Baker. And again, just a small example of something I thought factored into him kind of being dialed in today.
Yeah, and we have a $4.99 super chat from David S. Thank you very much, David. Saints forced 1,000 turnovers and still got killed. Joke of a football team. Go Bucs. Liam is the GOAT. A lot of Bucs fans very happy with Liam Cohen. And I think, I also think when we talked about this, I think it was the midweek show, we talked about this a little bit of Todd Bowles. I think we have to give Todd Bowles some credit there too, because Todd Bowles is the guy that hired Liam Cohen, right? So Liam Cohen's been doing a good job, but Todd Bowles is the guy that hired him. So credit there to Bowles as well. Like I said, I think the penalties were an issue today. So coaching wise, that needs to be cleaned up. That's something that, and again, I understand it's the Saints and stuff, but especially in that second quarter, you got to find a way to keep your cool, right? You have to find a way to keep your cool and settle down because you don't want to get thrown out of the game. You don't want to do anything that's going to hurt your team even more than the yardage loss. So yeah, I thought Liam Cohen had a really nice day. Obviously, his first time we're seeing him going up against the Dennis Allen defense. So good day for Liam Cohen. And now that I Bleav is the third straight. Yeah, it's the third straight year the Buccaneers have won in New Orleans. So a house of horrors for the Buccaneers for what seemingly is mostly from like 2010 on, pretty much. Like even with Tom Brady, 2020, yeah, okay, they won the playoff game and that helped, but they lost in the regular season. That the week one, 2020, 2021, they come back on Halloween night, they lose that game. So even with Tom Brady, they were still losing in New Orleans. Then the final year of Brady that they win, and then the last 2 years they've won. So pretty big bounce back game for this team and an impressive road win. So now they get to go back home for 2 straight with a little bit extra rest too. They play Monday night, so a little bit extra rest for a guy like Jamel Dean, who got banged up in this game. But yeah, offensively, very impressed with a lot of players. And look, the most impressive will be out tomorrow at some point. So there's going to be a lot of offensive players on that list and a lot of new ones. And that's something that we were talking about even before the show started. That's pretty cool, right? We enjoy doing it, because if we're talking about the same guys, okay, like they're expected to be there, but gets kind of boring, talking about the same 3 or 4 guys over and over every week. This way, we can throw in a few different guys here, and I think they definitely earned it.
Yeah, absolutely. And kind of going back to Todd Bowles here before we wrap up the conversation on the offense, I think everybody is obviously quick to criticize Todd Bowles when this team is not in a position to play. Coming out flat against Denver, you point the finger at Todd Bowles. Not adjusting in that second half against Atlanta, allowing Kirk Cousins to throw the football all over you. Maybe there's a little bit of argument today about how effective Spencer Rattler was on that play action rollout specifically. Didn't seem like they did the best job at adjusting to that.
Yeah, they made the adjustment in the second half, though. Right. They were able to make the adjustments. The Saints were really, because the Saints kept trying it, and in the second half it didn't work as well. But
I think the fact of the matter is, this is a Bucs team that after just a god awful second quarter, I mean, as badly as you could have scripted things to go for Tampa Bay, they go into that second half, they make the necessary adjustments, and they were the better team. Like, they were the much better team. And this is a position that they have found themselves in before where you kind of question if they're going to be able to fight their way back into this game. I think Todd Bowles, whatever he said to those guys at halftime, whatever anyone said to those guys at halftime, clearly went a long way. And I think he deserves a little bit of credit to that. So tip of the hat to Todd Bowles for making the necessary adjustments throughout this one. I was concerned with Spencer Rattler. I mean, all in all, I know that, again, we'll talk about the day that this defense had and a tough supporting cast for Spencer Rattler, because another storyline this week was just how busted up both of these teams were coming into it. But I thought for the most part, he played fairly well. And I said on the midweek show, I was not a big fan of Spencer Rattler. So I think if they continue to make things that easy for him, he could, be a game manager, game winner in New Orleans, because we've seen that kind of QB style of play win them games before.
Yeah, for sure. And like you mentioned, I was actually going to mention this too about, look, the Saints were banged up, right? The Saints were banged up coming into this game. Derek Carr obviously out, Taysom Hill out, and then to add insult to injury, no pun intended, Chris Olave, right, on that fumble, right, on that fumble, ends up going out of the game with a concussion, and it just seemed like it was just kind of snowballing. Saints, I Bleav, down to their third string center, and so yeah, when you say the Bucs look like the better team, yeah, they did, and it would have been concerning had they didn't, to be honest with you, right? Because look, for once in forever, it seemed like this entire season, the Bucs were the healthier team, right? The Bucs were the healthier team. They get Winfield back, they get Cansey back, they get Gedeke back. Gedeke, not sure if everybody noticed, but he's wearing the Guardian cap. which I mean it is pretty smart, right, for a guy in his position, with what he just had gone through with how many days he was in concussion protocol. But they get all those guys back, right? Obviously, they're down Rashad White. Also, a quick PSA on betting the Bucs. That's recorded, well before the injury designations are there, right? I do not know, and so it's basically we're not going to count them. So I was 1-1 because I had the under 41 points. One team scored more than that by themselves, so that was a big miss. But I did have Alvin Kamara anytime touchdown, so we'll go 1-1 this week for betting the Bucs. But yeah, I thought for one, like I said, for the first time this season, the Bucs were the healthier football team, and I think you saw it.
Any good sports book is going to avoid those Rashad White picks for you. So don't even worry about it. I don't think anyone's giving you a hard time about it. Don't beat yourself up about it. But
there was a comment left as soon as he was ruled out. He's doubtful. I was like, okay, relax.
Let's talk about some of the top pass catchers for this Tampa Bay Buccaneers offense today. Chris Godwin, man. Pay the man whatever he wants. 11 receptions, 125 yards, and 2 touchdowns for CG today. He gets the opening touchdown for the Buccaneers offense, and he finds the end zone again later on. This is just the year that I think everyone was hoping Chris Godwin would have as far as production. He has had a little bit of a revival here playing out of the slot in Liam Cohen's offense for the Buccaneers in 2024. And today was just another example, another big-time day for him. And on top of that, I think the importance of mentioning this aspect of his game, yards after catch, 125 yards today for Chris Godwin. I think over 100 of those were yards after the catch.
Yeah, 105 yards after the catch. I mean, it helps with the 55-yarder, right? It does help with that 55-yarder. I'll tell you who might be the happiest. Chris Godwin's agent might be the happiest because whether it's in Tampa or somewhere else, his client's going to be getting a whole lot of money in a couple months here. So it's making it tough for the Bucs, right? And we've talked about sort of Jalen McMillan hasn't really. I mean, I'm not going to write the book on him, right? But he hasn't really looked that good, right? So it's coming to a position where like you can't really say, oh, we can let Godwin walk because McMillan can just step right in and he's cheaper. You're going to be to a point where you're like, we have to keep this guy. Like we can't let this guy go. Yeah, Chris Godwin's been awesome for the Bucs, and he's been exactly what they needed. Mike Evans, look, the 1,000-yard thing, I'm sure he's still going to get it, but I'm sure he wouldn't really care if he was short if the Bucs won a bunch of games, right? And with Chris Godwin getting all the production that he's had, the Bucs are winning some football games. So I don't really think Mike Evans cares that much about that thing. And like I said, he's still probably going to get it. But yeah, Chris Godwin's been the man for the Bucs, and I think he's going to continue to be a huge part of this offense. It's been really, really good to see.
Perhaps the offensive MVP for Tampa Bay today, Sean Tucker, 3 receptions, 56 yards, and a touchdown. His first career NFL touchdown, a receiving touchdown. And then on top of that, we have to mention his performance carrying the football, the leading rusher for Tampa Bay. 14 carries, 136 yards, and a touchdown, averaging 9.7 yards per carry.
Just gouged them.
I mean, dude, this is the moment that I think a lot of Syracuse fans have been waiting for when it comes to Sean Tucker. And when you look at the layout of this running back room, I don't want to get ahead of ourselves here, but you take Rashad White out of the lineup for 1 week, and the running backs are historically good for Tampa Bay. So, I mean, where do we go from here, Evan?
Really quick, I just checked one of my leagues in fantasy. The one on Yahoo, Sean Tucker got 34 points. Like I said, helps no one because he is owned by 1% of rostered players.
Probably the guys that picked him up today, too.
Probably. Yeah, I'm sure. It's always like with them FanDuel things, right? If you like the online fantasy where it's like, with the money and stuff. Yeah. And you're like, and it's like you build your fantasy lineup, and the top dude that won the top prize somehow has Sean Tucker in his lineup. I'm like, come on, right? Yeah, Sean Tucker had a great day. Where do they go from here, right? And look, that's the thing. The Saints were not very good at defending the run coming into this game. That was something that I Bleav Nick Jennings, who is a writer for Canal Street Chronicles, who was the Saints SB Nation site. We did the Q&A this week, and he had noted that, right? He had noted that the Saints were not very good. They've been allowing 4.4 yards per carry, which was ninth the most in the NFL. And they allowed Kareem Hunt to rush for over 100 yards last Monday, and he hadn't done that since 2020. So this is a not very good rushing defense. The Buccaneers exploited that. And it does kind of suck for Rachaad White because I feel like he would have found success today. But people are going to say, well, they were this good without him. Rachaad White's still valuable to this offense, but it is nice to see other guys supporting. However, I say that Rachaad White's valuable to the offense. But my take is that Bucky Irving should be this team's running back one moving forward. That run he had, I thought he was taking it to the house.
31 yards.
Where he just sort of didn't go down. I was like, this is great.
Hey, different kind of running back, but I was getting shades of LeGarrette Blount, the way he just did not go down. And yeah, he looked unstoppable on that 31-yard scamper. Listen, I'll do you one better. Bucky Irving for running back one, but I took to Twitter and I said we should just move Rachaad White to slot receiver at this point. Sterling Shepard has been a more effective wide receiver 3 than Jalen McMillan so far this season. So why not see what Rachaad White can do at this point? I mean, if we are getting creative and we're running double reverse end arounds to Sterling Shepard, why not see what Rachaad White can do in that same position? I kid, kind of. But again, when we talk about a lot of the production that Rachaad White has had this season, it's in the passing game. So I think to most people, it sounds like a natural transition, right?
Yeah. Why not? I mean, wouldn't put it past them. No, I do wonder if you see maybe some sets like that, right? Especially if a guy like Sean Tucker can keep this up. Now, I'll keep that up, right? You're not going to keep that particular production up, but his season averages right now are through the roof, like because it's so much of an outlier and there's such a small sample size that like his average yards per carry has got to be like at an historic pace right now. So yeah, I mean, look, it does kind of suck for Rachaad White because I do think he would have got his. Had he been in the lineup today, but he wasn't, and the Buccaneers did a really nice job, and you can't really fault them for that. And again, Rachaad White can be useful to this offense. There's too many people I think that are like, he's terrible, this and that. You got to get him at I think there's a way he can be useful to this offense, but I think Bucky Irving needs to be. We're heading into week 7. I think Bucky Irving needs to be a team's running back one. I think he provides more. He provides more. I just think he provides more juice. He provides more energy. The runs that he can make, out of nothing, basically. I know, again, it was a struggling Saints defensive line. It was a struggling rush defense, but he made the most of it. And I think I've seen enough to where I'm comfortable with letting him get, not just splitting the carries, letting him get more snaps now than Rachaad White does.
Yeah, and I don't think we can talk about this offensive production without mentioning the big-time game today from the offensive line. This rushing performance isn't possible without the big guys up front creating a lot of the room that they did. And one of the big notable changes in that lineup, no Graham Barton today at the center position, but you got Big Bob Hainsey. And that is the benefit of having Big Bob Hainsey on your bench. I mean, damn, dude, most people aren't going to notice much of a drop-off, if anything at all, when you watch this game again there at the center position.
Yeah, and I can already see that. Oh, keep Hainsey in or move Barton to left guard. Relax, I forget who had exactly said it. There was somebody that said on Twitter a couple of days ago said actually Hainsey's best 2 games last season both came against New Orleans. It was kind of a coincidence, but yeah, the Bucs go down 1, right, and Graham Barton. But they go up 1 because Luke Gedeke, finally returned to the lineup after a long-awaited wait. Glad to see him back, right? Because it was getting to the point where you kind of were starting to worry about his personal well-being, right? And not necessarily about the football. The football was almost becoming secondary, right to this point. It was starting to get to that where you're like, man, like is this guy okay? So glad to see him out there. And yeah, Hainsey filled in well. I thought the entire offensive line played pretty well. Pass protection, the protection on the Otten touchdown was terrific. Baker had all day long to throw. I was pretty impressed with an offensive line that has struggled a few times against the Saints defensive line, no matter which player the Saints have, but they were pretty good in this one, and a massive reason why the Bucs offense was able to have as much success as they were.
Absolutely. And I think it's the perfect time to talk about the other side of the football. I mean, it really does feel like we're just getting started here. When you unpack this game, there's a lot people are going to be talking about here throughout the rest of the week. But when you look at the defensive guys who stood out today for Tampa Bay, I mean, literally all over the field. I think collectively as a unit, you're getting healthier. You're getting guys back in the lineup. Jordan Whitehead was a question mark this week. He is active for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Antoine Winfield Jr. returns to the lineup. But really, I want to highlight first Tyke Smith. Man, 2 forced fumbles, or maybe 1 forced fumble. One of them was ruled an incomplete pass, I think.
So if the first one's a fumble,
right?
How is the second one not? It was the same play.
Yeah, I mean,
the Saints ended up punting or whatever, but it's the same play. I don't understand how, if that first one's a fumble, how that second one isn't, because it was quite similar. But yeah, Tyke Smith had a great day. The forced fumble, and then capped it off late in the game with that other turnover.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's a performance that I think, when you look at the potential of this new draft class, this is a game that you can circle and be like, that's why Todd Bowles liked this guy so much, right? The physicality, being quick to the football, just having a nose for the football, and another ball hawk for this Buccaneers defense, specifically in that secondary back room, or that secondary room there, with a safety room already full of dogs, and Antoine Winfield Jr. and Jordan Whitehead. I thought, Jamel Dean left today due to injury. Tyreek Thunderbird came in. And I don't know if I have the best idea of how well he played, but I thought for him coming in at a difficult point, he did a decent job in helping that defense kind of clamp down there in the second half. Some other guys that popped up today as well along the defensive line. Vita Vea had a really big day. Kalijah Cansey back in the lineup had a big day, made his presence felt.
That's not a coincidence that both those guys had good days when they're both together. That's not a coincidence.
Correct. So when we look at, this Buccaneers defense, I mean, there's a couple of guys that obviously we can highlight, but where do you want to start? We can talk about this pass rush. We can talk about what they were able to accomplish today, stifling Alvin Kamara in the New Orleans offense.
Yeah, they couldn't run the ball to save their lives.
They really couldn't.
And when you have a rookie quarterback, especially one that's like Spencer Rattler's a 5th-round pick, a 5th-round pick for a reason. When you have a rookie quarterback making his first career start, just completely eliminating the run game is massive, right? It is completely massive. And I think the Saints actually early in the game were a bit too conservative at times, running the ball on 3rd and short. And it didn't work. So pretty big day. Speaking of big days, really quick, and I'm going to mention an offensive player here, but it's going to transition into the defense. Bucs rookies. A massive day for the Buccaneers rookies. Bucky Irving, 14 carries, 81 yards, and a touchdown. Tyke Smith, a forced fumble and an interception. And Chris Braswell had half a sack. So a big day for the Buccaneers rookie class here. Graham Barton out. Jalen McMillan struggled a little bit. But other than that, a pretty big day for the Bucs rookies. I want to start along the defensive line. Like I said, I thought their run defense was pretty good. Reminded me of like the 2020 to 2022 run defense, where it's just like you just couldn't run those guys. And I thought they made the necessary adjustments in the second half. I just think everything was just going too fast for these guys in the first half. You had two straight drives with turnovers from the Buccaneers, putting your defense in a tough spot. And you can only bend but don't break for so long. So I do think, obviously, we're going to have to see about Jamel Dean's status for next week. He left the game pretty early. It was pretty quickly ruled out, too. It wasn't like, he might be able to come back. It was pretty quickly. So I do wonder if Dean will be available next week. But yeah, I thought the the defense, specifically the defensive line, was pretty good, especially second half. They really got after Spencer Rattler pressure wise, right? They were able to come up with some key plays here. So I was impressed. I was impressed by the defense. Like I said, pitching a shutout. I mean, they're not really going to get talked about that much for pitching the shutout, but they did. The Saints scored all their points in one quarter. Like they didn't score anything else any other time. So pretty good day for the Bucs defense. Even though the box score won't necessarily show it, but I thought they did a pretty good job.
Yeah, a couple of guys played a big hand in getting after the quarterback today. Kalijah Cansey with a sack, Vita Vea with a sack from the interior there. Levante David notches a sack from the linebacker position. KJ Britt with half a sack from the linebacker spot. Chris Braswell with his first career sack. It is half a sack for him, but regardless, he gets up on the board for the first time in his NFL career. Let's not forget to mention Zion McCollum. Big time interception today. I think when the Bucs needed it most there at the end of the game to really continue to create some much needed distance. There was a point where honestly the Bucs decided to go for the 2-point conversion and wanted to get your thoughts on this as well. You go for the 2-point conversion, you go up 12 points. If you kick the field goal, you go up 11 points. Well, they attempt a swing pass to Bucky Irving. He does not convert, and they only go up 10 points. At that point, I still felt like there was too much time on the clock, and I didn't entirely understand the thought process. I mean, I guess I do. If it works, it's a 12-point game. It's 100% a 2-touchdown game. Yeah. But you just kick the field goal, and I got to be honest with you, man, an 11-point lead is a lot better than a 10-point lead. And I thought, that was one of those crucial decisions that I thought it could have bit them. Luckily, it didn't.
Yeah, I didn't like the decision. I don't love to chase points when you don't have to. And yeah, like to me, I understand. Well, you kick the extra point. All they need is a field goal and a touchdown, 2-point conversion. Okay, but if you didn't get it, all they needed was a field goal and a touchdown with an extra point to tie you. So I didn't love the decision. It is what it is. It didn't come back to bite them in the end. Luckily, it didn't come back to bite them. That was good. But yeah, that was definitely one where you were sitting there thinking like, maybe, right? And then the Bucs defense was able to force a punt, for New Orleans. But that came, like I said, I think that interception though by Zion McCollum, which it was a great grab. I think that is what calmed them down, right? Because at that point, yes, they had the lead, but it was still only a 4-point game. I think that is the thing that really calmed them down and got them back into a rhythm. They score a touchdown there, force a punt, score another touchdown, game, set, match. So I think that was what really got them. And McCollum, can't say enough about him, right? He has been really good, had good coverage on Shaheed earlier in the game on a deep ball. He's been just massive for the Buccaneers this season. And in a season where Jordan Whitehead's had his ups and downs, Antoine Mayfield Jr. has not been in the lineup since week 1, and Jamel Dean's had a pretty rough year, right? Where would the secondary be without Zion McCollum right now? Right? So I think look, you could say, oh, you should have traded Dean instead of Davis, but basically the thing was it was Davis for McCollum, right? And I think right now that was the right decision. I mean, that was absolutely the right decision. So Zion McCollum balling out for the Buccaneers, and he's on his way to becoming a pretty darn good cornerback in the NFL.
Yeah, even in the losses, the consistent level of play that we have seen from this guy is paying off for the Bucs. I mean, really, we talked about it before. They took a calculated risk headed into this year, moving on from Carlton Davis, putting a lot of pressure on Jamel Dean and Zion McCollum to step up. Jamel Dean, hopefully we get an update on his status later this week, but Zion McCollum has taken this corner job and run with it, potentially going to be facing the most pressure he has faced over the next couple of weeks if Jamel Dean cannot return to the lineup for Tampa Bay. But wanted to get your final thoughts here as we start to wrap things up. This was one hell of a performance for Tampa Bay. Again, there's a lot of things that we can nitpick and kind of go back and forth about, and I'm sure throughout the course of the week, we will, right? That's kind of the point of the midweek show. You get a couple of days to digest the game, watch it again, break down some of the highlights and game tape of some guys that you didn't get a good look at, and then you can come back to the table and say, all right, here's the reason the Saints scored 20 unanswered points in 5 minutes. Here's what has to be fixed, and here's what hopefully they can do. With a lot of tough teams yet to come, but Evan cannot overstate how important this division win is today for Tampa, because a loss today against New Orleans really would have set you back.
Big time. 2 straight divisional losses. It couldn't happen. It just simply couldn't happen. You would have had to, if you lost this game, you would have been looking at a scenario where, I think you had to beat Atlanta in 2 weeks anyway. Like, I think you can't get swept by the Falcons, but the way you lost that game last week, and then you come back into this one, needing to win this game. Like I said, I think if you would have lost this game, you would have had to basically win out the rest of your division games, right? You had to beat Atlanta, you beat Carolina twice, and beat New Orleans the last game of the regular season, which they may still win all those games. But I think this game would have been the first of, let's say there's 4 nails in a coffin, right? I think this game might have been the first nail, right? It being installed if you would have lost, because as far as division, right? As far as winning the division, wild card, you might be able to get a wild card spot, whatever, but couldn't afford to be 0-2 in the division. Just a massive game. And now, Saints started 2-0, and all of a sudden they're 2-4. They lost 4 straight games. Like, it's almost like they weren't that good, and they just played, the crappy Panthers and the Cowboys, who are down 14 right now. So I don't really know. Like I said, it's almost like they're not very good, and they were never very good. But again, they're very banged up, and the schedule makers screwed them. By the way, I will say that. I don't care about the Saints. I'm not going to feel bad for the Saints, but it's a brutal stretch. They played Monday night in Kansas City. They played Sunday. That's 6 days. They play Thursday night now. That is a brutal stretch by the schedule makers. That's insane. That is a brutal stretch by the schedule makers. But you're right. This was a massive divisional game, and one where the Buccaneers simply could not afford a loss. And also, trying to avoid 2 straight losses, for the first time this season, trying to avoid, because last year they started out 3-1, and then they lost 4 straight games, right? And that's where, they weren't really able to, that's where it sort of came down to the last game of the year to have to win the division, because mid-year they sort of failed, right? And now they're able to get back, bounce back, and got a couple of tough opponents coming up, though, right? The next 4 games are easily the toughest stretch of the season. So it's a gauntlet, but they got this one out of the way.
Absolutely. And Tampa Bay gets back in the winning column this week. They improve their record to 4-2. Later this week, we will keep you updated with some injury updates on Jamel Dean. We didn't talk about it, but Mike Evans also potentially going to be an area of concern this week on the injury report for Tampa Bay. So he was in and out of this game with some kind of injury.
I think he was on the injury report during the week a little bit too.
Didn't have a catch after the opening drive. He only had 1 target in the second half, although the Bucs only passed the ball 6 times in the second half of the game. But he did finish with 2 catches for 34 yards on 6 targets. Mike definitely looked awkward at some points out there. Got up a little slow after his second reception, and they really couldn't work him back into the game plan. But again, when you got a run game that works the way that it did today for the Bucs, you don't necessarily have to. But hopefully we get some kind of important update on him, because, again, the production of Chris Godwin is a big deal, but I think he can be that much more productive when you have a somewhat healthy Mike Evans on the field to distract some of these opposing defenses.
Yeah, for sure. Our friend Richard says he's in the lobby, so I think he's ready to go.
That's all right. Let's wrap it up with a call from Richard. I feel terrible. Hopefully we haven't had too many people waiting. Normally it pops up. All right, from the West Coast, you're on the Can of Fire podcast. Is this our guy Richard T?
What's up, guys? Richard from the West Coast.
Yes, sir. How we feeling, Richard?
Man, holy crap. I think you said it best. It took some years off my life there, especially in the second quarter. Hey, game momentum is a real thing, right? That kickoff or the punt return for touchdown, and then lets it back back-to-back turnovers, and before you know it, we're coming from behind again. But kudos to the coaching job, man. They really did second half adjustments, and once Godwin went for that 55-yard touchdown, they never looked back, and it was full steam ahead. And welcome to the Buck and Tuck show, guys. That was quite the performance. Very reminiscent of your not to the T, but your WD-40 days, right? Two guys going nearly 100 yards each, going for touchdowns, just barreling through, taking the edge. Just, man, what a game. What a game. And I could not be any more happier, especially the fucking Saints. God.
I completely understand, Richard. You talk about those fucking Saints, and after those interceptions, like I said earlier, I got that feeling in the pit of my stomach that we sometimes get during these New Orleans games. And I think this Bucs team showed that despite the setbacks they've had, as much as we want to talk about it, I think there's a lot of ways this Bucs team has shown this year that they are on a different level than where they were in 2023. And today, the resilient win on top of that is another way that they are proving to people they are building something here in Tampa Bay. And the Buck and Tuck show, man, I like that a lot. I mean, we might copyright that before anyone else can get to it. We'll put it on the T-shirts before anyone else does. I like that a lot.
Send me one.
I think it's the first time. I mean, really, this is the first time the Bucs have had an effective two-back system. And I don't want to say system because this isn't production they're getting every single week. But this is a glimpse at what a productive two running back backfield looks like for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And I don't think we've had that since the best days of Ronald Jones and Leonard Fournette. And even the best days of Ronald Jones and Leonard Fournette were not as productive as the Bucs were on the ground today. The Bucs have not had an offensive performance on the ground as good as they have today since Doug Martin did it by himself, I think, all the way back in 2016. It has been a very long time since we saw effective running from multiple running backs like we saw today. And I hope it does become a habit. With all due respect to Rachaad White, I hope we can take a serious look at what Sean Tucker brings to the table. And no, it's not going to look like this every single week, but damn, man, if Bucky Irving can continue to build and get the carries that he has been these last couple of weeks, I do think this run game can get more effective as the year goes on. They're figuring it out here, and Liam Cohen, he's got the ball rolling.
Yeah, 100% on that. Big kudos to Liam Cohen because, all those big name offensive coordinators got picked up first. The what's his name in Philly now, who is with the Cowboys, Moore.
Kellen Moore.
And Kellen Moore, and then what's his name? Kubiak, right? Goes to the Saints. Which you know what? At first I really wanted Kubiak for the Bucs. But kudos to Liam Cohen for bringing what he does, having insight with that with the defense, and man, I don't even think I'm making any sense right now. I'm just like so wall up and just super excited, man. It's just put up 50. We put up 50. Yeah. We put up 50 for the second time in franchise history. Dude, this is crazy. From one week to the next, Bucs have been you got like historically bad, right? From Falcons allowing the most allowing the most yardage in a game to a performance like this. Now we're making the most yardage in the game for the franchise. So it's exciting, man. This is exciting. It just needs to keep it going. Bring this. We're in Baltimore next week, right?
It's in Tampa, but versus Baltimore.
It's in Tampa. Oh, okay. So let's go back home. Let's pick up the pieces that, with the devastation of Milton coming through there, shout out to everyone over there going through that. And what a way for this team to pick up this city on their backs, go into New Orleans and just demolish them in that second half, dude. Let's go.
Yeah.
Let's go. Shout out to my family. They moved here from Calgary. They're watching the game with me. You guys say what's up. the Cannon Fire podcast. so,
all right.
So I'm trying to make Buck fans out of them, but we'll see.
There you go.
Hey, I mean, I think a game like today is going to go a long way. That was probably game of the week, maybe game of the year so far. One of the most exciting matchups I have seen, not even just the Bucs play, but any team so far this 2024 season. Richard, it has been a fantastic Sunday afternoon, and we appreciate hearing from you, my friend. Stay safe and go Bucs. We'll talk to you soon.
Go Bucs! Fuck the Saints! Let's go!
What more do I need to say?
Yeah, I mean I think that's a good way to close things out. One thing, obviously, Todd Bowles just spoke about it. He says makes it special. A lot of guys were playing with heavy hearts, just seeing what had happened to Tampa Bay. Of course, referring to Hurricane Milton, which I know Hurricane Alina just happened. That hit a lot of parts of Florida, the Carolinas. Hurricane Milton, though, it was closer, to Tampa Bay and Clearwater and St. Pete's and a lot of things like that. So, and he noted that a lot of those guys don't know what they're coming back to, right? Like that's the scary part. You don't know when you pull up to your house what's going to be there. So playing with a heavy heart today, playing for the city of Tampa, playing for the state of Florida, and they had a tough week. I mean, they weren't in their beds, right, this entire week pretty much. So really good win, and being able to do this, for the whole Tampa Bay community, for the whole city of Tampa and everything was pretty special. And I'm sure they took a lot of pride in being able to do that for a lot of fans who this week has been a very tough week for a lot of people. And whether you've lost, belongings or your entire living situation, it's been not easy for a lot of people. And, I'm sure the Bucs were happy to maybe provide just a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel there.
Yeah, you nailed it. This was a win that the city needed, I think. I have lived in Tampa, Florida my entire life. Never lived anywhere else. And I got to tell you, everybody said the day would come that there's going to be a hurricane that brings a direct hit to this Bay Area, and there's going to be a time where either you're prepared or you're not prepared, but this storm's coming for a long time. For 98 years, Tampa Bay dodged a direct hit from a hurricane, and Milton brought it just a week after Helene came in and really shook the town.
And if you guys notice, not the normal setup for Rhett, right? Because right now, his area is affected. He doesn't have power still, so that's why there wasn't a game preview. We unfortunately were not able to do that. We will have our regular scheduled content for you guys. All that, hopefully by next week or whatever. Rhett should hopefully have power. But Rhett's one of the thousands affected by this, right? So just a lot of heart goes out to a lot of people who are deeply affected by this.
Oh, yeah. Nearly 1 million people in the Bay Area without power. And honestly, so many people got it so much worse than we did, too. So,
yeah,
there were certain things about Milton that weren't as bad as a lot of people expected to be. But there were so many people that I had seen. Just the damage around town is unlike anything I've seen in my life. So, again, sending out our thoughts and well wishes to anyone affected by Milton. Now is the time to rebuild, right? This is nothing that this city hasn't done before. You look at the resources, you look at the people around you, you pick up and you lift up the people around you. And I think this city's, going to be better than ever before we know it. But absolutely sending our love to anybody affected by the storm this week, and make sure you reach out, look for resources. They are out there. They are available. And they are local. Also, one last shout out to, I don't know about Tico because they bill me for my power every single month, but all the linemen from the other states who have come down to help restore power to this Bay Area, those guys are busting ass, and it really is appreciated. There's a lot of people still don't have power, but they have done a very, very good job of really isolating a lot of these areas. There were, I believe the day after the storm, there were close to 900,000 people without power. And the last I looked early this morning, they have that number under 400,000. So, I mean, just in a couple of days' work, they are doing a great job. And, this is real life. This is sometimes when things creep in that are bigger than football. But A win like this is exactly what I needed because I was prepared to be in a terrible mood when I jumped on here at the end of that second quarter. I was very upset. I told my poor mother, we'll wrap it up with this story and then we'll go home, I promise. Long show today. My poor mother, her and I watched the game today for the first time since Tom Brady played for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. The last game that her and
ages
I
ago.
Together. Yeah, the golden years. The last time her and I watched a full game together was when the Bucs played Arizona on Christmas.
Okay.
It was the last game we watched. And that, you remember how much of a nail biter that was.
Yeah,
that
it was
game,
a last-second field goal Bucs won.
That game took years off my life. Well, the last couple of games me and my mom had watched, oh, holy hell. No, the last game me and my mom watched was the wild card round, Tom Brady's last game against Dallas. The last game we had watched before that was Christmas, and then the last game we had gone to before that game was against Cincinnati.
Yeah.
Tampa Bay came out, I Bleav, had a 17-0 lead.
They did, yes. Mama Rhett, and the Bucs, dude, or that's not a great, not a great trio typically.
Unfortunately, I told my poor mom.
She was at the watch party a few years ago against Washington. Bucs will lose that game.
I love my dear mom. One of the biggest supporters of my entire life. One of the biggest supporters of the show. She was at the watch party, as you said. But I looked at her and I said, Mom, this may be the last game we watch together.
I can't do it.
I can't do it. Listen. The only variable that's changed this week is you. I've got my setup. I've got everything that I normally have going into football Sunday. I don't know, your presence here felt like it was throwing something off, but no, we had a great time. I'm glad that they were able to put a bow on it the way that they did. Made for an exciting afternoon. And Bucs are 4-2, man. You can't complain with a win like that over New Orleans.
No, 2 games over 500, and like I said, coming into a big stretch, right? Coming into a tough stretch of 4 games here, where Baltimore, Atlanta, Kansas City, San Francisco, and then you got the bye week. So if you can come out of this stretch, still in one piece, it's a real positive. But you need to win this game today first. That was step 1, basically, and step 1 was accomplished.
Happy birthday to the moderator, Buck Wild. He said his best 51st birthday present.
They scored 51 points for you. How about that?
Oh, it was destiny.
Yeah.
Dare I say. Mikey Kelly, Richard T. from the West Coast. Buck Wild, the moderator, holding it down. Chris Higgins, Tropic Breeze, Realty. Realtor Dave Zussman. Couple of competing realtors in here. Look out. Apalachicola 05, Edwin Hernandez, Joe Rojas. Thank you to Amazement for the super chat, and I'm trying to make sure that I get the other one here so we can recognize. Had a $10 super chat or a $5 super chat from David S. Thank you, David S. Bat W, Brutal as Bucks, and anybody else that we may have missed. We really appreciate you guys. Make sure you subscribe to the channel for more great Tampa Bay Buccaneers content, and follow the show on social media, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. All of those are Cannon Fire Podcast. You can find my co-host Evan on social media. Find him on Instagram at Bucks_daily. You can find him on Twitter at EvanNFL, and check out his written work at BucksNation.com. What have you got this week?
We'll have the day after reactions. Just looking at a pretty big game. Obviously, a lot of things to unpack. So we'll try to keep it a little limited, but a lot of things to unpack. And then later on in the week, gonna have all of our game coverage coming up for the next game against Baltimore. So stay tuned for sure. And then on the Cannon Fire Podcast YouTube channel, like I said, we will have the most impressive and disappointing players out tomorrow. We will be back to our regularly scheduled programs. I know we were kind of in and out last week. Did the midweek show, did betting the Bucs, didn't really do a players to watch, didn't do a preview show. So this week will be much more back to normal. So expect all your regular content for throughout the entire week. So it's gonna be back in business here.
Absolutely. Last but not least, you can find myself, Instagram and Twitter at Rhetticus, RHETT. AKUS. If you follow me, I will follow you back. Interact with us on Twitter as well. Cannon Fire Pod. Been a little more active on that account. Doing some live tweeting during the games. It has been a lot of fun. Always going back and forth with everyone. Love to hear your Bucks takes. You know what? It's been a long time since we've done this. Send us an email. cannonfirepodcast@gmail.com.
Send us a postcard.
Yeah, smoke signals. I mean, we take it all. We'd love to hear from you. We will talk to you fine folks later this week. I'm your host, Rhett Matthew, signing off from my co-host, Evan Wanish. Thank you once again for hanging out with us. We'll talk to you in the next one. Until then, and as always, thank you for listening, and go Bucs.